File 12 of A Treatise of Human Nature, by David Hume, Volume 1. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by George Yeager. Book 1, Part 2, Section 3, of the other qualities of our idea of space and time. No discovery could have been made more happily for deciding all controversies concerning ideas than that above mentioned, that impressions always take the precedency of them, and that every idea with which the imagination is furnished first makes its appearance in a correspondent impression. These latter perceptions are all so clear and evident, that they admit of no controversy, though many of our ideas are so obscure, that it is almost impossible even for the mind which forms them to tell exactly their nature and composition. Let us apply this principle, in order to discover farther the nature of our ideas of space and time. Upon opening my eyes and turning them to the surrounding objects, I perceive many visible bodies, and upon shutting them again, and considering the distance betwixt these bodies, I acquire the idea of extension. As every idea is derived from some impression, which is exactly similar to it, the impressions similar to this idea of extension must either be some sensations derived from the sight, or some internal impressions arising from these sensations. Our internal impressions are our passions, emotions, desires, and aversions, none of which, I believe, will ever be asserted to be the model from which the idea of space is derived. There remains therefore nothing but the senses which can convey to us this original impression. Now what impression do our senses here convey to us? This is the principal question, and decides without appeal concerning the nature of the idea. The table before me is alone sufficient by its view to give me the idea of extension. This idea, then, is borrowed from and represents some impression which this moment appears to the senses. But my senses convey to me only the impressions of colored points disposed in a certain manner. If the eye is sensible of anything farther, I desire it may be pointed out to me. But if it be impossible to shew anything farther, we may conclude with certainty, that the idea of extension is nothing but a copy of these colored points, and of the manner of their appearance. Suppose that in the extended object, or composition of colored points, from which we first received the idea of extension, the points were of a purple color. It follows, that in every repetition of that idea, we would not only place the points in the same order with respect to each other, but also bestow on them that precise color with which alone we are acquainted. But afterwards, having experience of the other colors of violet, green, red, white, black, and of all the different compositions of these, and finding a resemblance in the disposition of colored points of which they are composed, we omit the peculiarities of color as far as possible, and found an abstract idea merely on that disposition of points, or manner of appearance, in which they agree. Nay, even when the resemblance is carried beyond the objects of one sense, and the impressions of touch are found to be similar to those of sight in the disposition of their parts, this does not hinder the abstract idea from representing both upon account of their resemblance. All abstract ideas are really nothing but particular ones, considered in a certain light. But being annexed to general terms, they are able to represent a vast variety, and to comprehend objects which, as they are alike in some particulars, are in others vastly wide of each other. The idea of time being derived from the succession of our perceptions of every kind, ideas as well as impressions, and impressions of reflection as well as of sensations, will afford us an instance of an abstract idea, which comprehends a still greater variety than that of space, and yet is represented in the fancy by some particular individual idea of a determinate quantity and quality. As it is from the disposition of visible and tangible objects we receive the idea of space, so from the succession of ideas and impressions we form the idea of time, nor is it possible for time alone ever to make its appearance, or be taken notice of by the mind. A man in a sound sleep, or strongly occupied with one thought, is insensible of time, and according as his perceptions succeed each other with greater or less rapidity, the same duration appears longer or shorter to his imagination. It has been remarked by a great philosopher, that our perceptions have certain bounds in this particular, which are fixed by the original nature and constitution of the mind, and beyond which no influence of external objects on the senses is ever able to hasten or retard our thought. If you wheel about a burning coal with rapidity, it will present to the senses an image of a circle of fire. Nor will there seem to be any interval of time betwixt its revolutions, merely because it is impossible for our perceptions to succeed each other with the same rapidity that motion may be communicated to external objects. Wherever we have no successive perceptions, we have no notion of time, even though there be a real succession in the objects. From these phenomena, as well as from many others, we may conclude that time cannot make its appearance to the mind either alone or attended with a steady unchangeable object, but is always discovered by some perceivable succession of changeable objects. To confirm this, we may add the following argument, which to me seems perfectly decisive and convincing. It is evident that time or duration consists of different parts, for otherwise we could not conceive a longer or shorter duration. It is also evident that these parts are not coexistent, for that quality of the coexistence of parts belongs to extension, and is what distinguishes it from duration. Now, as time is composed of parts that are not coexistent, an unchangeable object, since it produces none but coexistent impressions, produces none that can give us the idea of time, and consequently that idea must be derived from a succession of changeable objects, and time in its first appearance can never be severed from such a succession. Having therefore found that time in its first appearance to the mind is always conjoined with a succession of changeable objects, and that otherwise it can never fall under our notice, we must now examine whether it can be conceived without our conceiving any succession of objects, and whether it can alone form a distinct idea in the imagination. In order to know whether any objects which are joined in impression be inseparable in idea, we need only consider if they be different from each other, in which case it is plain they may be conceived apart. Everything that is different is distinguishable, and everything that is distinguishable may be separated according to the maxims above explained. If, on the contrary, they be not different, they are not distinguishable, and if they be not distinguishable, they cannot be separated. But this is precisely the case with respect to time compared with our successive perceptions. The idea of time is not derived from a particular impression mixed up with others and plainly distinguishable from them, but arises altogether from the manner in which impressions appear to the mind without making one of the number. 5 notes played on a flute give us the impression and idea of time, though time be not a sixth impression, which presents itself to the hearing or any other of the senses. Nor is it a sixth impression, which the mind by reflection finds in itself. These 5 sounds, making their appearance in this particular manner, excite no emotion in the mind, nor produce an affection of any kind, which, being observed by it, can give rise to a new idea. For that is necessary to produce a new idea of reflection. Nor can the mind, by revolving over 1,000 times all its ideas of sensation, ever extract from them any new original idea, unless nature has so framed its faculties that it feels some new original impression arise from such a contemplation. But here it only takes notice of the manner in which the different sounds make their appearance, and that it may afterwards consider without considering these particular sounds, but may conjoin it with any other objects. The ideas of some objects it certainly must have, nor is it possible for it without these ideas ever to arrive at any conception of time, which, since it appears not as any primary distinct impression, can plainly be nothing but different ideas or impressions or objects disposed in a certain manner, that is, succeeding each other.